Okay, so we're walking down from north to south. Right, so we've now come to the end of the EA works. It's about 30 or so feet, and we're starting moving down. This stage, that's probably about 12 feet, less basically, moving in. And okay, so what we've got here is the first sign of the layer. Now, this particular layer, it starts very sandy. It's quite distinct. The lighter colour sand is quite smooth, and at this stage we can see tiny bits, and I've touched them and smelt them, what I think are essentially London clay small nodules. And the sand here is sitting at the very just above the London clay. Moving around the corner, the sandy layer is showing better here. I'll just put it into a wide angle to give you more perspective and move in. The cliff here, essentially, I'm quite close to it, but 10 feet. And the sand layer is sitting on top of the London clay. But now we start, what we see right now is the sand layer gets narrower, and essentially at the bottom of the sand layer we've got what I'm calling the flint and gravel layer. And I've looked at it, and it doesn't contain any shells, absolutely no shells whatsoever. It's mostly flint and what I think are small bits of quartz. So, moving along further, sandy layer. Interestingly, some parts of it have got two colours. I'm presuming this is just due to it drying out. And it could be my mind playing tricks, but I thought the darker layer seemed a bit more rough, a bit more coarse, and the lighter layer, the lighter yellowy layer, is more smooth. And the flint and gravel layer, which underlies the sandy layer, isn't visible. It vanishes at some stages. Okay, and here we are, and I think what we've got here is recent erosion and slips. I'm making a wild stab here purely based on my visits to the Naze for bird watching, etc. And I think this line here moving down has come down in the past, say, 2 years. Okay, we'll move on. So we just moved on about 20 feet, just to show you another layer. And interestingly as well, I think it must do with the drying out, but it still doesn't account for perhaps the feel of it, but I won't get distracted. So there we have got quite a big sand layer as well, and we can see flint and gravel on the here, and I'll just show you some of it. The flint gets a bit bigger as we go down towards the south, and what I've just noticed as well, careful how I come over here, and likewise there we go. So I think some of the black bits there are bits of London clay, but I'll show them in bigger size the further down we get. We've moved another 15 to 20 feet, and interestingly enough, there's a whole layer here of stained stone. I mean, some of it is obviously all concrete workings. I should imagine from previous sea defences, there's a slip there. It's very narrow. It's probably about 10, 12 feet. But the sandy layer is just below, and we're seeing what I'm still calling clay nodules, and I think these have come out from the sandy layer, under the sandy layer, as the slide has taken place. And it's quite dark. Stained by iron. I'm getting quite confused. Perhaps done by the red crag 3 million years ago. Anyway, let me move on. Or actually, it's probably been stained by seawater. We'll go down that way. I've only walked about 15 feet just to show you the sand layers is carrying on. At this stage, the gravel layer isn't visible. I suspect because this London clay that butts out is probably hiding it under there. We'll move on further. The layer continues. Still puzzled as to what in effect is the very dark orange sandy part. It almost reminds me of the Kesgrave Sands in Gestingthorpe. But interestingly here, what we can see is, I think that's sitting directly on top of the London clay. So we will move on. So we've moved another 10 feet. And interestingly, what's happening here is the sandy layer is getting higher. I'm presuming that's probably because of the downward slope of the cliff when it was formed. So the London clay is starting to get slightly higher now, and the sand layer is going up. And that's an example of it. I think there's a sandwich tern passing by. You can hear him screeching out there. Anyway. And we'll just move another 15 feet there, because I think what we're going to see now is a mixture of the sandy layer and the clay nodules and the flint as well, and the quartz. So we've just moved another 10 feet, as I said, and this is the start of where we can actually see the sandy layer embedded with clay nodules, tiny ones, and flint. I won't break it too much. It crumbles very easily. I can't see any flint in this section. Well, flint is a chert. It's got a cortex, dark, not rounded. And so at this point, we've got the first visible sign of the sandy layer mixed with the clay nodules and the flint layer. It's moving a bit further down, bits and pieces sticking out. And just to put it into context, essentially, I think that's it's on essentially the start of the London clay, and then we've got the loess just above, the sort of vertical columns going up. I'm presuming that's the loess, and the top bit is the soil. And the actual layer, it undulates, is that the word? It's come down a bit lower right now. We'll move on. I'm just looking ahead. I think we've got a stretch where it absolutely vanishes, purely because of erosion, most likely, recent erosion. I can't see it from here, probably another 30 feet before we pick it up again. So we'll walk down. Of course, it may be showing, but essentially what's happened is the erosion simply covered it with these parts that are coming out like buttresses. So we'll move on for another 30 feet. We've moved on about 30 feet or so, and I've stopped at what I call the alcoves. Let's have a quick check at this one. The first one. No, I can't see. I mean, some of it is stained slightly yellow, so that's probably when it was eroded. So we'll move out, and I think there's another big alcove around the corner where we are going to see it. Let's just move in. Here we go. Wow, this one's going quite deeply in. It wasn't that big about a year ago. So, right here, we picked up the sand layer again. So there was a gap of 40 feet or so, and the layers at the end on the ground level, essentially. It's not directly on top of the London clay, I don't think. It's slightly underneath it, which sort of lends to a sort of channel theory, fluvial channel. But let's get a bit closer. Here we got the sand again. This feels quite smooth. And I keep banging on about it, but the darker colour sand is more coarse. Modern brick. We'll just turn around and go over to this section. A bit here. And this bit you can see a bit of flint in the mix of the sand. We'll come out the alcove and follow it around. And we're coming to the part where these trees have collapsed within the past 2 years or so. And I think at this stage I'll walk out just a bit further to give you scale and context where we are. So we've started off from the northern end, moving down. The cliff is now starting to rise. Probably that section where I don't know, I'm presuming it's a chestnut of some sort, has been lying there. And it's probably about 25 feet high at that stage. And then it gets to the end there, the midpoint, which is probably about 35 feet. I think when we get to just over there, it's going to become much more visible. Okay, so we walk back in. No signs as yet. That's the alcove over there. Just move. And I think it isn't visible purely because of the slope of the erosion. Moving on. I mean, it's probably on the hair, but we'll carry on. So it's London clay at the bottom. That's the lesser showing. And as we come to this one, we can pick up the sandy layer again, and that's it there, on top of the clay. And then it rises, and starts to get quite visible and broad. Just manoeuvring in between fallen clay and old trees. It's quite a large layer, and I think we can see under there the gravel layer is what I think, but it's going to become more visible as we move a bit further down. Right here, moving in, I think the gravel layer is beginning to show itself again. And I don't think this has been brought in by the recent tide. It's packed too tightly. A bit of vein quartz, perhaps. flint, the cortex showing, brown. I call this chert, but interestingly enough, we've got a first sign of a seashell, of a shell there, which I hadn't seen before. It looks quite white. It hasn't been stained. There aren't many, but there we go. That's the gravel layer that's starting to show itself now. And more context here. I think moving here, I think probably about 6 feet of London clay. 6 feet has been gone in the past year or so. Okay, we'll carry on there. We've just gone 10 feet, and just wanted to show you something. I think this is at the very end, the layer starts again. I mean, this could be just staining. It feels clay from where it's been washed out, but just to show, it's almost at sea level, ground zero. Okay, so for the past 15 feet, I mean, we haven't seen the sand, purely the stained clay and small nodules, probably remnants of when it was washed out. And we're going to move on to that recent slip. And at this stage, and the marker is this magnificent tree here, is the differentiation between what I think is the London clay and the loess. And what I have noticed is, it could be corrected, and I've taken more detailed photographs, but the layer is so distinct. It stops fairly abruptly, and at the bottom of the loess is essentially a gravel layer. I've looked at it through binoculars. I can't see any marine sediments. Shells, etc. It's mostly flint and quartz, and it doesn't appear to be sandy. Sort of loess, essentially. And then we come down and we've got the clay, but that bottom layer on there is quite distinct from the layer we've been looking at, i.e. the sand, the yellow sand and gravel layer. And this is the point where the loess is showing more distinctly, with clear demarcation. We're going to move on, and I think for about 40 feet or so, we're not going to see any sign of the sandy layer, because I think it's been covered by all of this and perhaps washed away. Okay, so another 30 feet on, and the hill is rising. Well, the slope is increasing as we go further south. And what we've got right now, this is interesting, is a distinct sandy and gravelly layer at seashore level, and it's quite definitely on the London clay. And I'll move in closer, but I'm just going to pan just to give you the context. At this stage, I estimate the cliff to be about 30 feet. We're moving in. And I've taken photographs of all of this, but that's quite distinctly a yellow sand and flint layer. And I just don't think this has been brought in recently by the tide. It's far too embedded. That's quite smooth. That's taking a move. Bit of stained flint, or yeah, cortex showing. Bit red. Yeah. So this is the start I think, where we've got the sandy layer combines with the flint and gravel layer, and I think it's quite distinctly on the London clay at this stage. At this section, I don't know, I would guess about at least 10 feet. We just move just a bit down here. I'm not a good example of that layer. And then of course, further to go down, parts of it is hidden by the clay fall. So we'll move on. We've moved on for about 30 feet or perhaps 40, and we've picked up the layer again. The layer is rising, and it's getting a bit more clay. I think the sand has been washed out at this stage, but that's quite clay, but it's stained at yellow. Okay, we'll carry on around the corner there. We've walked about 50 feet, and I think we're coming to the end whereby we'll be able to get evidence of the sandy layer. That's just a staining, and the London clay at that stage is a bit soft for some reason. Go around the corner to see if we've lost the trail as such. And at this stage, yeah, the cliffs are probably about 50 feet now. Okay, so as you can follow from the video, I think the last stage where we saw the gravel and sand layer was a bit further up, just a bit before the big fallen tree, which I've got marked. I call this the midpoint because the cliffs are about 50 feet. The lowest layer isn't that distinct at this stage, and the London clay rises to probably perhaps 40 feet. I think what I'll do is just move out further to give some more context of where we are. Yeah, I think we're just past the halfway point. Okay, we'll carry on down, and I'll stop every now and then just to give an indication of where we are. So we moved on a lot of 50 feet now. At this stage, just to give you the context of where we are, I think the cliffs have risen to about perhaps 70 feet, and the London clay comprises essentially 80% of the height. And then we've got what I think is actually the sand and gravel layer sitting possibly on top of the clay, and it's also what I think is the start of the remnants of the red crag. Essentially, we're now picking up the red crag again, which, as we go further north, it sort of vanishes from this point, which is about halfway, as the cliffs start to slope suddenly. I'm taking photographs of this, but I'll try and zoom in to that level. Okay, we'll move on further down. We moved on again, and what we've got here is not part of the sandy layers. It's simply the erosion of the red crag, which has come down and covered the London clay at this stage. So it's not part of that layer. I've been looking up a bit, trying to spot the junction bed. I think it becomes a bit more visible towards the very end, well, the beginning of the southerly section, because I think, but at this stage I can't see it. So far, I think the sandy layer we've seen with the gravel, I don't think that's part of the junction bed in between the red crag and the London clay. It simply lacks fossils, and I don't think that the small black ones we've seen, I don't think they're phosphatic. I think they're London clay ones. I mean, at this stage, just going a bit further, I can see remnants of shell in the red crag that has come down, which I wasn't picking up in the sandy layer further south. We'll carry on moving down to the south. We moved on a bit. I've just been having a look at the cliffs now, which are probably 80 feet above us, set further back. The erosion is quite severe, actually, at this point. I mean, that's a massive boulder there that's packed full of shells, etc. But looking at the red crag above, I'll try and zoom in. I think, I've had the binoculars with me, and there's a sandy layer that's very similar to what we've seen at the far south end. I haven't seen any flint or so in it, and at this stage I think another candidate for consideration is essentially the sandy and gravel layer has been it's essentially marine sediment that's been brought in the period before the red crag was laid down, and it's a distinct layer in itself. Now, in terms of why is it at times seem to be embedded in the London clay, well, perhaps put that down to simply that was simply a channel infill. The marine sediment was opportunist and took advantage of a channel in there, hence why at some stages it appears to be inside the London clay with London clay above it. Though on average, it does seem to be clearly demarcated between the loess and the London clay. Okay, well, I'll stop with my speculation, and we'll just move on. Just having a look at the undulations, is that the word for it? Presuming that's caused by the freezing and the ice, the effect of the ice. But okay, we'll move on. But certainly, from since around that corner, the yellow sand layer on the loess has gone. It isn't in the southern end. And we're nearing the end right now, but we'll still carry on. We're nearing the end. But I've just seen what I thought was an interesting feature, but I think easily explained. It looks to be a combination of loess, soil, London clay, red crag staining, chock full of flint and any shells. But essentially, this is simply this has come down probably from part of the junction bed. Over the time, it's simply come down to the bottom, so not part of the unique sand and gravel layer at the southern end. Just an update. I've walked another 50, 60 feet or so. All London clay would overfall from the red crag, perhaps junction beds, etc. But no distinct layer, which doesn't start until you get further past that corner. Okay, we'll just carry on to the end. Okay, so essentially we're at the end, or the start of the southern end. There's the cliff just over there. The sun's against us now. I'm going to stop it now, and I'm probably going to walk back and see if I can get any fossils. But I've recorded everything in terms of the exact positioning, where everything started from, and some more detailed photographs. My immediate conclusion, if I'm pushed to one, is the sand and gravel layer, marine sediment, and flint brought in. It's clearly been brought in by water. Nothing's been deposited by the Environment Agency, and it's filled the period between the red crag and the London clay. And for any sense, in essence, that's a distinct. That's another layer, part of the layers of the Naze. And how do we account for what of those places where it appears to be embedded in the London clay, i.e. in the middle, London clay above, London clay below, purely fluvial channel infill, perhaps. But the main thing is we've got a record of everything. Okay, I'll stop it now. I'll turn this around. And that's the end. Cheers.